one thing that I kind of asked in the beginning was, what are some of the factors? We're talking a bit about what food insecurity, for students, what that kind of looks like, but also in general with the community, how food insecurity, it's a part of many different issues. So it's not an isolated experience at all. But the question I asked was, what, Sherry, if you can list off what you thought were different factors that, are usually like involved with someone who's also food insecure, what they also might face barrier-wise.
Are we talking about just for students in general, or just the whole community?
Anyone.
Well,
it could be students or anyone.
Yeah, so I feel that a lot of folks, I say specifically for students, I feel like they have to prioritize their books, right? And so sometimes that could result to food insecurity. Sometimes it's food, office supplies. If they're just barely starting to work, and they kind of have to weigh stuff down, and then there's possibility of becoming homeless, and it kind of like goes from there. So if they're an international student, there's a lot of lack of support, coming from their immediate family, and so they kind of have to do things on their own. So
yeah, and one thing that I've continually had to try and think about different methods for problem solving, especially for international students that experience food insecurity, is having language accessible signs. Because I think that, we want the food pantry, wherever it is, or the food bank, or anywhere, someone who experiences food insecurity, you want them to feel as welcome as possible, because there's automatically already going to be this element of shame that people attach to being food insecure and asking for help.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people, I feel, are almost too proud to apply for SNAP or food stamps. Because every time they utilize it, there's always going to be those people that would, prejudge them, even though they have no idea what their background is, their financial background. And the thing about basic food is, it's not permanent. I mean, it's not permanent. It's temporary. So everything that people are going through, sometimes they're very temporary. So it is to assist them move forward in order for them to become successful in the future.
Yeah. And that's one thing that I definitely try and get across to people as well, is that when, they are experiencing food insecurity, asking for that help will actually help them get out of being in this situation quicker than if they were to not ask for help and to just, continually like sit, and they'll slowly get out of the situation that they're in, but it will take much longer than if they were to accept help. And help can look like a lot of different things. It doesn't have to be SNAP, but it could be. But I totally hear what you're saying.
Yeah, and I think also one of the reasons why is just they don't know where to ask the questions to. Like sometimes they don't know where they can access resources. I also think that plays a huge factor on food insecurities. Home, just being in poverty basically, when person is struggling. So yeah, I think it really has a lot of things to do with that. Not knowing where or how to access resources.
Yeah, totally. I have a couple others that you like hit on as well. One of them is rising medical expenses or not having insurance. Another one is high employment rates, especially when we think about, how COVID had, people lost a lot of their jobs and there was unemployment, but with that unemployment benefits starting to go away again and people maybe not being able to find work, what are their situations going to look like? And I think the situation is always developing with COVID especially, and it's revealed a lot of difficult situations that people are, experiencing. But
And yeah, and then so I just have something to say about high unemployment rates. It's definitely happening right now during COVID.
mm-hmm,
And on the other hand, I used to work for the employment security department doing unemployment through unemployment insurance company. And um, because, job searches is not mandatory right now. A lot of people can literally just file their claims weekly
yeah,
and not do the job searches as they're supposed to, because again, UI weekly benefits, it's not permanent, and eventually you have to find jobs, and theoretically it takes a couple months to even get an interview, a job interview. And it all depends on whether they are resume ready, they are cover letter resume, and or they handle themselves well in a job interview. So there are those skill factors that needs to come in. um,
yeah,
and so I feel like there's so many people right now that are almost nearly taking advantage of the situation, that because job searches is not mandatory, so they can just do their weekly claims, and then they'll find jobs when it becomes mandatory again. And so I feel that that also plays a huge factor on that right now where we stand
yeah.
in the
I
community.
totally also hear you about, especially when you're talking about like it's really nice that we have been able, the government's been able to help people when they don't have to necessarily be applying for jobs constantly, because that wasn't realistic.
Mm-hmm.
But then thinking about how are we going to transition when maybe there still aren't a lot of jobs out there for people, and what
Mm-hmm.
is that going to look like with that transition? And when is this grace period? How long is that going
Yep.
to last? And is there going to
Yep.
be a crash?
Right, and that's why a lot of folks are sometimes being called, through reemployment assessments, and that's, where I used to come in their lives. So there are those certain programs where they could literally almost they're mandated to attend this appointment, or their UI weekly benefits gets affected.
Mm-hmm.
So negatively, and so I feel so, back at work source, that's kind of one of the things that one of the resources that I feel like a lot of folks should utilize um, to get them back into the workforce.
Yeah.
So I, I guess I'm just also coming from a different, I don't know, upbringing, because I was born and raised in a different country, and we don't even have weekly benefits. We don't have anything to kind of rely on, with no weekly benefits, no Goodwill training center, no thrift shops, no dollar stores, no food pantry. um there may be discussions of food insecurities that we're having right now, but there's not a whole lot of resources for everyone to utilize. So we
Yeah.
have these resources to access, and for us that's available, and in order
Yeah.
for us to become successful. And I feel like a lot of people really, some people don't like to utilize it as much. And I think um, some of them, again, that they don't know how to access it, or they just don't have the right intentions you know to become successful.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot. I mean, I totally agree with like a lot of what you're saying. There's so many layers to it, because it's
Hmm.
part of the difficult thing is there are a lot of resources out there, but kind of like what you mentioned, um, even knowing that these resources exist, or that like
Mm-hmm.
these resources are free to people, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
purely to help people move through society,
Mm-hmm.
and that there's this certain shame that's associated with asking for help when it comes
Mm-hmm.
to accessing these resources, no matter how much time.
Yeah,
um,
and then sometimes, due to unfortunate circumstances in their life, because some folks they just live in rural areas that um sometimes they don't have access to I don't know, they don't have internet access. They rely on their prepaid phones. There are still those prepaid phones that exist to this day, and you know the, there are those type of people that really do not have a choice. So,
yeah,
and for those people that do have a choice, they do have a choice to be better. Um, yeah, the resources we have here, we're so rich with resources in Whatcom County
yeah.
and Whatcom's gadget so much, and it's almost that's why I give a lot of kudos to folks that do a lot of community outreach, because that's where the news gets out. Um, a lot of seasonal farmers, migrant farmers, they don't really have a lot of, I guess, again, those they fall under those categories. They don't know where to ask or how to ask because, you know, they they're blue collar folks. So,
And
um,
one thing that I think Whatcom County does struggle with, actually, which I see Whatcom County having a lot of rich agricultural lands, pretty accessible compared to a lot of
mhm,
more highly populated places. We
mhm,
have a pretty good economy. We have a lot of service industry type of jobs, but we also have, a lot of like pretty qualified positions that like we are good at, but we have a fair amount of food deserts,
we do, yeah, we do.
which isn't what I included as much in this presentation.
Mhm,
But maybe even Olivia and Heidi. Heidi's probably more aware, but the amount of food deserts, that are in Whatcom County alone is kind of crazy.
mhm,
But I define it a little bit later. Or
mhm,
uh, food deserts here is essentially, let's see. It's essentially like saying that convenience stores and small independent stores are more common than full service supermarkets. Um,
mhm,
oh, here's Kumbi. And these prices at the stores usually have higher priced foods, lower quality foods, and less variety of foods in supermarkets or
mhm,
grocery stores.
mhm.
Access to healthy food is also affected by lack of transportation and long distances between residences and
Yeah.
supermarkets to grocery stores.
Mhm,
Um, and we have like a surprising amount of food deserts in Whatcom County alone,
mhm.
which those are definitely really difficult to combat, because the biggest way to, change food deserts is to essentially get full service grocery stores in those
Mhm.
neighborhoods. Um, but there's
Yeah.
also other solutions, such as, like getting better access to transportation and that sort of stuff. But really, the best
Yeah.
solution would be getting better grocery stores.
Yes, absolutely. And if we can do one of those, I know the food bank travels to Lummi, you know.
Yeah, there is a
Um,
traveling food bank truck. Yeah,
mhm. Yeah. So I just wish that we have a little bit more of that.
yeah, totally.
That'd be cool.
Um, and then kind of like, what we've been talking about, I wanted to include just some numbers from Feeding America's 2020 reports, because something that I think we can all acknowledge is that COVID-19 has definitely worsened this issue, but it's also shown a lot of, I think it's highlighted something that was already very existing. Um, as we can kind of see here, pretty much all of them are within the 60% range, which is a lot of people. To give you all a better understanding of what Feeding America is, if you're not aware, Feeding America is a nonprofit organization that's nationwide, and they have a food bank in every county in the United States of America. So they have a food bank pretty much everywhere. And they have over, I want to say it's over 200 or 300 food banks that they help serve. So they have this survey. 69% of clients reported that they had to choose between utilities and food. 67% had to choose between transportation and food. 66% had to choose between medicine and food. And 57% had to choose between housing. So this is obviously a very high issue. It's just, yeah, it's crazy to me that these numbers are so high. It personally even surprised me a little bit. But just kind of like what we were talking about with COVID-19, at the same time, there were a lot of people who very quickly lost their support system. And we all kind of experienced it last year. It was crazy. But kind of on the bright side though, we can kind of see pretty much around the economic collapse of the housing collapse around 2008, we see that there was a huge increase in these trends and projections. But around 2018 and 2019, it was actually at its lowest in, over a decade. And because of COVID-19, we saw a huge spike in increase, but it wasn't even at the highest it's ever been. The green line is child food insecurity rates, and the orange line is overall food insecurity rates. The projections are looking a lot better. It looks like people are, able to slowly get back to not being as food insecure, but it's definitely something that we're seeing a lot of influx again, rather than a steady trajectory downward. Cool. All right, Olivia, I'm gonna pass it to you.
Yes. Okay.
And talk for a second about, some of these things of what can be done.
So what can we do about this, right? Here at Whatcom specifically, we have a food pantry, and actually yesterday we kind of had like a food bank where people were able to drive up and donate food items for the food pantry. And so that was really great. And some other ways are, there are kitchens out there where you can get food. But one thing that would be really interesting that I think the country and also maybe the world needs to work on is what restaurants do with their food at the end of the night when they're closing down, because we know that a lot of them have a tendency to throw away their food actually, when they could be donating it to homeless shelters or to people who just need it, maybe who aren't homeless but need that food. They could create prepackaged meals or just donate the ingredients that they don't deem usable anymore, but that are still good for us. Also, I think maybe you could go to churches. They might have something for you. And so the one with the restaurants, that has to do a lot with reducing food waste, but also that starts in your own house too. And at grocery stores. It's similar to hunting. Don't take as much. Don't take too much. Only take what you need and what you're going to use. So one way to combat that is never go shopping hungry, right? You're going to buy so much more than you need because you're hungry. You're like, oh, I want that, I want that, I want that. But in actuality, you don't want it and you don't need it. Hunger makes everything so much better than it really is. And like one idea is if you buy a rotisserie chicken, you can eat the meat and then use the bones to make a broth. or soup. That's what my mom does. And you can do that with a lot of meats, actually. Like even a turkey after Thanksgiving. So yeah, it all starts at home. And you could also grow your own garden, have your own herbs being grown, your own vegetables. Even if you live in an apartment complex, you could have those little garden boxes hanging out of your window. And I know some apartments, if you're in a bigger city, have rooftops with gardens up there, which is really great. And like community connections, that has to do again with churches, soup kitchens. And also, if you have the money, you can always donate too. Like if you see a homeless person, you could always buy them a meal. I mean, I think that's a great way to help. So.
Yeah, and so specifically, Sherry, to kind of give you a little bit more context too, Olivia and I have been working pretty closely together since you joined the student leadership at Whatcom Community College. And we specifically have been working together to try and create, some different programs. So that's, what we did yesterday was do our first Orca food drive with the foundation, which is really exciting because we got, I would say, a good amount of food. It's really hard to estimate. We didn't weigh it just yet, but I would say we got like a good several big bins worth of food. And I think, it's one solution of the many different kinds that it takes to kind of solve these sort of, these sort of issues. It's not going to be solved by one food pantry on a community college campus. It kind of takes a community effort, kind of like Olivia was talking about. I think it really takes a lot of different sort of ideas, and it takes an initiative and an entire community to help out these people and these individuals who are experiencing these sorts of issues. Because really, Olivia, you had a really good, the pyramid that we were talking about, you had a really good word for it, and I forgot what it's called.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's at the bottom. It's before anything, we need food and water. Yeah, so one thing, obviously, that I think will always first come to mind is food banks. The cool thing about food banks is that they've expanded so much more, and I'm sure you're aware of it. But food banks have really been able to grow, and I think they've been able to become more a part of the communities as need has grown. I think it was in the 1940s that food banks were created, and it was a very simple system. They bought surplus from farmers and then they would distribute to people. But now they have completely been able to add so many more benefits. Like they do job training, safety net, resource enrollment, healthcare screenings, voter registration, education partnerships. One to name off even here, education partnerships, is with the Bellingham School District, I believe. There have been meals, that have been donated because of COVID-19. It would be great if that was more of an institutional thing than just a pandemic response. But I think that it lays out a really hopeful look into what we could provide for our communities if we were to continue to have this sort of momentum. And then the numbers, it looks like here, because of the pandemic, I wrote it down in my notes, but it looks like the numbers rose. 17 million more people needed food assistance with the COVID-19 pandemic, which is a fair amount of people. Okay, thanks, Heidi. We will do that. And then Olivia kind of touched a bit on the Orca Food Pantry. The Orca Food Pantry right now, we have the ability to provide non-perishables for students, we really try and aim towards as many foods as possible, not just like the dusty old can that was in the back of someone's pantry. Like, we really do try and provide a list for people to know exactly what kind of foods to buy for students, whether it be grab and go food or whether it be food that students look to cook with later on. But we try and, you know, have all of that available. And like Olivia was saying, so that's a picture of my little balcony that I'm growing a bunch of little plants right now. And you can't see, but I also have a couple tomatoes and tomatillos. But I think one thing that I really like to talk to people about is growing where possible. I don't think that people are aware that you can buy seeds and plants with EBT. I think that's like the coolest thing ever, is that you can literally use government assisted money and you can grow your own garden. You can do a lot of really cool things. I spent about, you know, $50 on plants and seeds last weekend, and now I'm like growing food that will hopefully sustain me throughout summer for, you know, it won't like fully, but it'll add to my meals and it'll take away the cost that I otherwise would have spent. And one fun fact that I think is very funny that also makes people think with food liberation is that there's 40 million acres that are just lawn, and that's 3 times more than corn or any other irrigated crop, which is crazy to me because people, you know, if they have a lawn, they have the ability to grow their own food. And I think that there's a lot of possibility there with food liberation, but I won't get into that too much because I could talk about that for probably hours. And again, like Olivia was touching on, volunteering is a really good way to get connected. I think community connections is really the biggest source of solving a lot of these issues. When, you know, we recommend when people want to get involved, you can either volunteer or donate. Usually money is the best way to donate to a food bank because they're able to have a much better spending ability than we're able to at a regular grocery store. But there's also so many other stuff out there, kind of like Sherry and I have been throwing around. And like Heidi recommended to me of joining a Buy Nothing group, and maybe I haven't gotten food from that, but I think that saved me money for someone who's personally using a government assistant food program. You know, every dollar counts. And so I think that if we're able to, you know, lean on each other as community members and be able to help each other out, whether it's through churches or our neighbors or Facebook groups, or even getting to know our local farmers and purchasing directly from them. There is so much that we can do that I think we often only think of the only place to get food are restaurants or supermarkets. And it's just, it's not the way that it has to be. But one thing that I wanted to highlight as well, in case anyone was interested, was just talk a bit about some of the resources. If you are experiencing food insecurity, or if someone you know is experiencing food insecurity and you wanted to know a bit about what you could recommend to them, these are specifically for Whatcom. The Whatcom Asset Building Association has 4 PDF files of all of the food banks in the Whatcom and surrounding area, and they're in English and Spanish, which is really awesome. The Bellingham Food Bank, which is open Tuesday through Thursday, our Orca Food Pantry, which is open every weekday from 9 to 4, the Opportunity Council, which helps with rent, childcare, utilities, the Buy Nothing Facebook groups, which, Sherry, if you live in the area, I highly recommend you look for these Buy Nothing Facebook groups. They are really awesome, and they get to let you, you know, meet some of your neighbors, which I think we don't get enough of these days. And, you know, like giving people more knowledge about EBT and WIC. but it looks like we might be out of time soon. Okay. Yeah, I think that's all the time that we have, but do you, Olivia, have anything else that you would like to add?
Sure. Don't be afraid to reach out. And don't be afraid to let your friends know that they can reach out, because we do have a lot of options here at the college and in Bellingham, or even wherever you live, you could find someone and reach out, because there's no shame in being food insecure. You know, it's a stigma that we need to break. And also, this might seem really silly, but if you do see a homeless person and you have the money to buy them a meal, if they have an animal, please buy them treats or something too, because they're going through the same thing as well, which is super minor. But yeah.
Well, I don't think it's minor. I think, you know, like and I often like hear a lot of people saying, I don't want to give them money. And it's like, okay, well, what about we buy like paper bag lunches where we like, you know, put in like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and an apple. And whenever you see someone who's houseless, you give them that paper bag, and like it will just help them along their journey of wherever they're headed in the healing. Because yeah, again, it comes back to the community, and I totally agree with you, Olivia.
I think that's about it. Yeah, no shame.
Yeah.
It's okay. You'll get through it, hopefully.
Sherry, did you have any comments for either of us, or anything else that you kind of wanted to add before we head back to the group space?
No, I think you guys did a really great job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You guys did. It was amazing. Yeah. Yeah, definitely heart shapes if I can type it. I'm with Heidi.
Thank you. Well, we also had a Kahoots, but I think we had really good discussion here. And we really appreciate, especially since you're our only participant, that you came to this. But yeah, hopefully we'll see everyone back in the larger space. I still believe that we had quite a few participants there. So yeah, all right.
Oh, well, yeah. Really quick, you guys, one of the things that I really like about the Bellingham Food Bank is they have those gleaning projects, right?
Yes.
Those are really helpful because I live out in the countryside, and I utilize them to get our fruit trees gleaned. So instead of just like
those gleaning
falling off of the
projects are
tree,
awesome.
they're amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, all right. Well, it was really nice to meet all three of you. Heidi, I will definitely schedule a time and a day for both of us to kind of like, I don't know, debrief. We have yet to do that. I know. So, well, it was really nice meeting both of you. I'll see you guys back in the main session. Yeah.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah,
Awesome.
no worries.
Thank you, Sherry.
My pleasure. Take care, guys.
You too. Bye.
Bye.